He screamed at her. "I've outgrown you. I'm a vice president and you're nothing." He told his wife of 5 years to pack a bag and get out of his luxury condo. What he didn't know, as he handed her a few $100 bills for a hotel, was that he wasn't just kicking out his wife. He was kicking out the secret, undercover billionaire who owned the entire company he worked for. He thought he was closing a chapter. He was actually signing his own warrant. This is the story of his epic downfall. Marcus Reed believed the world was divided into 2 types of people: rockets and anchors. He was, in his own estimation, a rocket. At 34, he was already a senior director at Ascension Dynamics, one of New York City's most aggressive tech logistics firms. He worked in the gleaming glass and steel monolith known as the Ascension Tower, a building that pricked the Manhattan skyline like a needle. Marcus was handsome, sharp, and utterly ruthless. He wore $3,000 Tom Ford suits, had a standing reservation at Per Se, and navigated the corporate world with the predatory grace of a shark. His wife, Elena, was the anchor. At least that's how he saw her. Elena Hayes, she had kept her maiden name, something he'd initially found charmingly independent, but now found vaguely annoying, was to Marcus aggressively average. She was pretty in a quiet, forgettable way. She was smart, he supposed, but had no ambition. 5 years ago, he had met her when she was a university librarian. He'd been charmed by her calm. Now that calm felt like stagnation, the ultimate proof of her mediocrity. She also worked at Ascension Dynamics, but while he operated on the 70th floor, she was a mid-level data analyst down on the 25th. They commuted separately, rarely discussed work, and moved in entirely different orbits. He was a rocket, ascending. She was processing invoices. "Elena, are you even listening?" Marcus snapped, loosening his silk tie as he stalked into their sprawling condo. The view from their living room was a staggering panorama of Central Park, a view he felt he had earned. Elena looked up from her laptop. She was curled on the sofa, wearing simple grey sweats. "Sorry, Marcus. Just finishing a reconciliation report." He sneered. "Riveting." He tossed his briefcase onto a leather Eames chair. "I just spent 3 hours in a strategy session with Chloe Bishop. We are restructuring the entire European logistics arm. And you're reconciling." Elena closed the laptop, her expression placid. "Someone has to make sure the numbers add up, Marcus. Otherwise, your grand strategies are just expensive fiction. Save the philosophy, honey. I'm telling you, this new Vance Global acquisition is shaking things up. The new owners are cleaning house. They don't care about reconciliation. They care about vision." Vance Global was the mysterious private equity firm that had bought Ascension Dynamics 6 months prior. They were ghosts. No one had met the new owner, who was rumored to be some reclusive old money heir, referred to in memos only as the chair. "Chloe thinks I'm the top candidate for the new VP slot," Marcus said, pouring himself a glass of Macallan 25. "She's basically running the transition, and she sees my potential." Chloe Bishop, the name hung in the air. Chloe was his direct superior, the executive vice president. She was everything Eleanor was not: blonde, loud, surgically sharp, and dripping in Cartier. Marcus and Chloe had been having an affair for 8 months. It was, he justified, a merger of talent. "That's great, Marcus," Eleanor said, her voice quiet. "You've worked hard." "Damn right I have," he said, "and I'm not going to let anyone or anything hold me back." He looked at her, curled on the sofa, and a cold sense of decision settled in his gut. She was an anchor, and it was time to cut the rope. He was thinking about his future. He was thinking about Chloe, about the VP title, about the bonus he and Chloe planned to liberate from their flagship project, Project Odyssey. He was not thinking about the laptop Elena had just closed. It wasn't a reconciliation report. It was an encrypted, real-time audit of the entire company's finances, sent directly to a private server in Switzerland, and the name on the account she was flagging for irregular expenses, the account for Project Odyssey, was his own. "I'm going to take a shower," he said, already mentally drafting his breakup speech. "Okay, Marcus," Elena replied, opening her laptop again. "Have a good night." He walked away, missing the flash of ice in her eyes. He was a rocket, all right. But rockets, when they fail, don't just drift. They crash. The promotion came on a Tuesday. Marcus was summoned to the 70th floor, not to his usual office, but to the executive conference room. Chloe Bishop was waiting for him, flanked by two stone-faced men from Human Resources. "Marcus," Chloe said, her smile as bright and hard as a diamond, "on behalf of Ascension Dynamics and our new partners at Vance Global, I am thrilled to officially offer you the position of Vice President of Global Strategy." Marcus felt a surge of pure adrenaline. This was it. The final rung before the C-suite. "Chloe, I'm honored," he said, projecting a mask of humble gratitude. "You'll be overseeing the full rollout of Project Odyssey," she continued, handing him a new keycard. "This comes with a significant salary increase, a new corner office on the 72nd floor, and a bonus package that will negotiate." The look she gave him was electric. The HR reps clapped politely. The moment they left, Chloe walked around the desk and draped her arms around his neck. "We did it, baby," she whispered, her voice husky. "We're the new power couple of this entire tower." "Just the tower?" Marcus murmured, pulling her close. "I was thinking the whole city." "One step at a time," she laughed. "Now there's one last piece of business." "What's that?" "Your wife." Chloe's face hardened. "I can't have my new VP, my partner, going home to a low-level analyst. It's unseemly. It looks weak. The board values decisiveness, Marcus. Vance Global values strength. If we're going to celebrate this, I want to know you've cleared the deck. Cut the anchor, Marcus. Tonight." Marcus nodded, his heart thumping with a mix of excitement and cold resolve. Consider it done. That evening, he didn't go straight home. He and Chloe went to the Modern, drinking champagne that cost more than Elena's monthly salary. They laid out their plans, not just for Project Odyssey, but for their real project, using the project's massive, intentionally inflated budget to skim millions. They would create shell corporations, file doctored invoices, and divert a percentage of the capital into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was Chloe's idea, but Marcus had perfected the methodology. It was foolproof. By the time he arrived at the condo, it was nearly 11 p.m. He was flushed with victory and champagne. Elena was in the kitchen, packing a simple lunch for the next day. The sheer domesticity of the act filled him with a sudden, sharp revulsion. "We need to talk," he said, tossing his keys on the marble counter. Elena looked up, her expression unreadable. "Okay. I got the promotion, Elena. I'm the new VP." "I heard," she said. "The memo went out this afternoon. Congratulations." Her lack of enthusiasm was, to him, the final insult. "Is that it? Congratulations? This is the biggest moment of my career, and you act like I just found a $20 bill." "I'm surprised is all," she said, closing the container. "With the new Vance Global oversight, I assumed they'd be doing more thorough reviews." "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. "It means," Elena said, finally turning to face him, "that Project Odyssey's budget is bloated by nearly 40%. The projections are based on flawed market data. It's a house of cards, Marcus." He was stunned. Not just that she knew about the project, but that she had the audacity to criticize it. "You're a data processor, Elena," he spat, his voice laced with contempt. "You sit on the 25th floor and check spreadsheets. I am on the 72nd floor designing the future. You have no idea what you're talking about." "I know numbers," she said simply. "And these numbers are a lie." That was it. The last straw. "You know what?" "You're right," he said, walking to the hall closet and pulling out her old canvas suitcase. He threw it on the floor between them. "I've been blind. But now I see. I'm a rocket, Elena. And you are a lead-lined, concrete-filled anchor. And I'm cutting the rope. Tonight." Elena stared at the suitcase. "What are you doing? I'm ending this. I want a divorce." He pulled his wallet out, took out all the cash he had, about $800, and threw it on the counter. "This is a high-end building. I can't have you squatting here. I want you out. Tonight." "Marcus," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You're kicking me out." "I'm liberating myself," he corrected. "I've outgrown you. I've outgrown this charade of a marriage. I'm moving on to bigger and better things. I'm with Chloe Bishop now. We're partners, real partners. She understands me. She's in my league." He expected tears. He expected begging. He expected something. Elena just looked at him, a profound, unreadable sadness in her eyes. It wasn't the sadness of a victim. It was the sadness of a judge about to pass sentence. "Chloe Bishop," she repeated, as if tasting the name. "The woman who's been signing off on your fraudulent expense reports for 6 months. I see?" Marcus froze. "What did you say?" "Pack your things, Elena," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "I want you out of my apartment in 1 hour." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Your apartment." She looked around the multi-million-dollar condo, at the floor-to-ceiling windows, at the curated art on the walls. "Yes, I suppose you're right." She picked up the suitcase and walked to their bedroom. Marcus, feeling the first prickle of unease, poured himself another drink. He'd done it. He was free. An hour later, Elena emerged. She had packed 1 small bag. She was wearing a simple black coat. She looked like what she was, a dismissed employee, a discarded wife. She walked to the door. "Elena, wait," he said, feeling a sudden, inconvenient pang of something. Guilt? No. Pity. "Don't make this ugly. I'll have my lawyer send you a standard severance package. Just sign the papers and we can all move on." Elena paused, her hand on the doorknob. "You're right, Marcus. This won't be ugly." She turned to look at him one last time, her face a mask of cold porcelain. "It will be thorough." She opened the door and walked out, closing it softly behind her. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. It was done. He drained his glass, triumphant, and sent a text to Chloe. "The anchor is cut." Elena Hayes walked out of the service entrance of the building. She didn't want to see the doorman, the one who always greeted her as Mrs. Reed, the one she always tipped generously at Christmas. The November air was sharp, biting at her face. She stood on the sidewalk of East 57th Street, just another woman in a dark coat, holding a single suitcase. Marcus had been right. She looked like nothing. A sleek, black Maybach S680, so dark it looked like a sliver of the night sky, pulled silently to the curb. A man in a dark suit, Arthur, her head of security, stepped out and opened the rear door. He did not ask any questions. "Good evening, Miss Vance," he said, taking her bag. "Arthur?" she replied, her voice regaining a steel it had not held in 5 years. She slid onto the plush, cream-colored leather. The car smelled of polished wood and quiet power. The name on her analyst paycheck, her driver's license, and her marriage certificate said Elena Hayes. This was her mother's maiden name. It was the name she had chosen when, after her father's death, she'd decided to go undercover inside the empire he had left her. She had wanted to understand the $80 billion behemoth, Vance Global, from the ground up. She had wanted to find the rot. And she had. She had also, foolishly, fallen in love. She'd met Marcus at a university gala she'd attended as a mid-level benefactor. He'd been dynamic, charming, and seemed so refreshingly ambitious. He hadn't known who she was. He saw Elena Hayes, librarian. She had loved that. She'd loved him. She had built a life with him, maintaining her cover. She'd bought their condo through a shell corporation, one of hundreds she controlled, and leased it back to them at a rate Marcus could afford. His massive salary, which he was so proud of, was a drop in the ocean of her personal wealth. She'd joined Ascension Dynamics, one of her own companies, to be near him, and to keep an eye on the transition after her holding firm acquired it. She had wanted to be a wife, not a chairwoman, and for that, she had been called an anchor. Elena picked up the encrypted satellite phone from the armrest. She dialed a number. It rang once. "David, it's Elena." The voice on the other end was warm but instantly alert. David Foster, the CEO of Vance Global and her late father's most trusted advisor. "Elena, are you all right? Where are you?" "I'm in the Maybach. I'm out," she said, the word catching in her throat. "He kicked me out, David. He's with Chloe Bishop." There was a heavy silence. David had warned her about Marcus. He had seen the man's ruthless ambition. "That absolute fool," David said, his voice hardening. "What are your orders, Miss Vance?" The Ms. Vance snapped her back to reality. The heartbroken wife, Elena Hayes, receded. The chairwoman, Elena Vance, took her place. "He thinks I'm a low-level analyst he just made homeless. He thinks he and Chloe are about to get rich off Project Odyssey." "He doesn't know you've been the one flagging their invoices, does he?" David asked. "He has no idea. He just called me an anchor and told me I didn't understand his vision. So it's time we give him a lesson in strategic oversight. Activate the Vance protocol. I want a full, immediate freeze on all assets associated with Project Odyssey, effective 9 a.m. tomorrow. I want his new office, the one on the 72nd floor, locked. Change the security protocols." "Done," David said. And David, the offshore accounts, the ones in the Caymans he and Chloe have been feeding for months. I don't want them just frozen. "Mom? I want them seized. I've had the passcodes for weeks. Drain them, every last cent. Transfer it all to the Vance Foundation's relief fund by morning." David let out a low whistle. "That's several $1 million, Elena. It's a bold move before the audit is public." "He called it a bonus package," Elena said, her voice turning to ice. "Consider it a donation. And one more thing. The condo, the one on East 57th, I want the locks changed by 8 a.m. Have Arthur's team clear out my personal effects tonight and put the rest of his, and Chloe's, belongings into a storage unit in New Jersey. The property is to be scrubbed and listed for sale by noon. And Mr. Reed? He's a vice president now. He's a rocket. Let's see how high he can fly with no wings and no fuel. Don't let him know any of this is happening. Let him walk into that building tomorrow, thinking he's the king of the world." "And what about you, Elena?" David asked, his voice softening. The Maybach was now crossing the bridge, heading toward the Vance family's triplex penthouse on the Upper West Side, a home Marcus never knew existed. "I'm going to have a bath," Elena said. "Then I'm going to get some sleep. And tomorrow morning, you and I are going to chair an emergency board meeting. It's time the chair, finally came to the office. She hung up, leaned her head against the cool glass, and watched the city lights blur past. The tears finally came, not of sadness, but of cold, clarifying rage. Marcus Reed woke up in his own bed, alone, and felt magnificent. He stretched, the Egyptian cotton sheets cool against his skin. The silence in the condo was golden. No Elena puttering in the kitchen, no quiet, judging presence. Just him, his ambition, and the stunning view of the park. He sent a text to Chloe. "Morning, partner. See you on the 72nd floor." He took extra time getting ready. He chose a new, razor-sharp Brioni suit. He put on the Patek Philippe watch Chloe had given him. The one he'd told Eleanor was a client gift. He felt like a king. He grabbed his briefcase and his keycard, his new, shiny, VP-level keycard, and walked out. The first crack in his perfect day appeared at the elevator. He swiped his new card for the executive lift. Access denied. He frowned. He swiped it again. Access denied. He sighed, annoyed. A glitch. He was forced to use the regular staff elevator, crowding in with analysts and admins. He recognized a few faces from Elena's department on the 25th floor. They looked at him with a strange, nervous energy. He ignored them, stepping off on the 70th floor and walking to the executive stairwell. He swiped his card at the door to the 72nd floor executive wing. Access denied. Now he was angry. He called Chloe. "My new card's not working," he snapped. "I'm locked out of the stairwell." "What?" Chloe sounded distracted, her voice tight. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm in my office. Just meet me in the main boardroom. We have a problem." Marcus felt a twist of irritation. "A problem? We are the solution, baby. What's wrong?" "It's Project Odyssey," she whispered. "The funding. It's been flagged." Marcus's blood ran cold. Flagged? By who? Compliance. Worse. It's a chair-level flag. All assets are frozen. All payments. All wire transfers. Everything. "That's impossible," Marcus said, starting to walk quickly toward the boardroom. "We're the only ones with the authorization codes." "Apparently not. Marcus, the entire budget is locked. And that's not all." Her voice cracked. The Cayman account. It's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean empty," she shrieked, and he could hear the panic in her voice. "Zero balance. Every dollar transferred. I can't trace it. It's just gone." Marcus stopped walking. He was in the middle of the 70th floor atrium. People were starting to stare. He lowered his voice to a furious whisper. "That is $5 million. How can it be gone? This has to be an internal rival. Someone knows. Someone's framing us." "We have to fix this, Marcus," Chloe said, her bravado evaporating. "David Foster just called an emergency all-hands board meeting for 10 a.m., in person. He said the chairwoman is flying in. The chairwoman. She's finally showing her face." Marcus's mind raced. This was bad. But maybe it was also an opportunity. "This is it," he said, his confidence returning. "This is our chance. We go into that meeting. We present Project Odyssey. We show them the vision. We pin the flag on some low-level accounting error. We'll blame Elena's department. It's perfect. The sloppy work of a mid-level analyst. We'll say we found the discrepancy and locked the funds ourselves to protect the company. It makes us look like heroes." Chloe was silent for a beat. "You'd throw your wife under the bus?" "I don't have a wife, remember?" Marcus said coldly. "I cut the anchor. Now are you with me? We're the Rockets, Chloe. We're going to own this." "Okay," Chloe breathed, calming down. "Okay, you're right. It's a data entry error. We found it. We're the heroes. Let's get our presentation. My office. Now, on my way." He hung up and strode to her office. He swiped his old keycard. Access denied. He swiped his new one. Access denied. What the hell? He muttered. He knocked. Hard. Chloe wrenched the door open. Your card too? She asked. Both of them. Something is seriously wrong with security. Let's just get the presentation and go. They grabbed their laptops and headed to the main boardroom. The atmosphere in the executive wing was thick with tension. No one was talking. Everyone was just waiting. Marcus felt a single cold drop of sweat trace its way down his spine. He'd blamed the keycards on a glitch. He'd blamed the frozen funds on a rival. But as he stood outside the 80th floor boardroom, watching the most powerful people in the company file in with grim, silent faces, he realized this wasn't a glitch, and it wasn't a rival. It was an execution. The boardroom on the 80th floor was a place of legend. It was known as the Observatory. 3 of its walls were 30-foot-high panes of glass, offering a godlike view of the city, from the Statue of Liberty to the George Washington Bridge. The 4th wall was a seamless, black digital display. In the center sat a colossal, single-slab mahogany table so polished it looked like a dark, still lake. Marcus and Chloe took their usual seats, halfway down the table. They were VPs, but today they felt like interns. The entire executive board was present. David Foster, the CEO of Vance Global, sat at the head of the table. His face was granite. "Thank you for assembling on such short notice," David began, his voice amplified by the room's hidden microphones. "As you know, Vance Global acquired Ascension Dynamics 6 months ago. We have, until now, allowed the existing management structure to remain in place while we conducted a top-to-bottom review." He paused, letting the tension build. "That review," he continued, "has found irregularities. Significant, systemic, and, in some cases, criminal irregularities." A nervous murmur swept the room. Marcus felt his collar tighten. He exchanged a glance with Chloe. She was pale. "We have found that certain flagship projects have been used as vehicles for embezzlement. We have found conflicts of interest, corporate waste, and a culture of arrogance that is unacceptable." David looked down the table, his eyes seeming to land on every single person. "These issues are so severe," David said, "that the chairwoman of Vance Global has decided to personally oversee the restructuring. She has been on site in this very building for 5 months, conducting a silent audit." The blood drained from Marcus's face. On site? He'd never seen a chairwoman. He'd never seen any new owner. "She has been watching," David said, "and she has seen it all. I am now going to turn this meeting over to her. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the chairwoman of Vance Global, Ms. Elena Vance." Marcus stared at the name on the digital display. Vance? He didn't make the connection. Not yet. He, like everyone else, turned to the main door. The door opened, and Eleanor walked in. It was not the Eleanor he had kicked out last night. This was not Eleanor Hayes, the anchor. This woman was dressed in a navy blue, custom-tailored power suit that probably cost more than his car. Her hair, which she usually wore in a simple bun, was down, styled in sleek, professional waves. Her face, free of the natural makeup she usually wore, was now defined, sharp, and utterly cold. She was flanked by 2 bodyguards and a man Marcus recognized with a jolt of horror, Arthur Harrison, the head of the white-collar crime division at the district attorney's office. She walked to the head of the table. David Foster pulled out her chair. The room was so quiet, Marcus could hear the sound of his own heart hammering against his ribs. Chloe made a small, strangled noise, like a dying animal. Marcus's brain simply broke. It refused to process the data. He was looking at his wife. He was looking at the woman he'd thrown $800 at. He was looking at the nothing he had discarded, and she was standing at the head of a table where he had just been fighting for his life. "Please be seated," Elena said. Her voice was different. The warmth was gone. It was crisp, clear, and dripping with absolute authority. She sat, and the rest of the board followed. Marcus and Chloe remained standing, frozen, like statues in a tragedy. "Mr. Reed, Ms. Bishop, you seem surprised," Elena said, her eyes locking on them. "Please, sit. This meeting is, after all, primarily about you." Marcus collapsed into his chair. His vision tunneled. He couldn't breathe. Elena tapped a control on the table. The massive wall display lit up. "Let's talk about Project Odyssey," she said. Project Odyssey, Elena Vance began, was, according to Mr. Reed's own proposal, a paradigm-shifting logistics solution, a way to streamline our European distribution using predictive AI. She looked directly at Marcus. "A brilliant vision, Marcus. Truly. I was impressed when I read the initial brief." Marcus opened his mouth, but only a dry, clicking sound came out. "The problem," Elena continued, "is that the vision was fiction. The budget, however, was very real. On the massive screen, a complex flowchart appeared. It showed the $200 million budget for Project Odyssey, and branching off it, like tumors, were red lines. "Mr. Reed and Ms. Bishop," Elena said, her voice cutting through the silence, "created 3 shell corporations: Bishop Logistics, Reed Holdings, and Odyssey Consulting. All 3, I'm sure you'll be shocked to learn, trace back to an omnibus account in the Cayman Islands." She clicked a button. Bank statements flashed on the screen. Account numbers. Routing numbers. "Over the last 6 months, Mr. Reed and Ms. Bishop have approved $15.8 million in consulting fees and expedited shipping retainers to these 3 companies. Companies that have no employees, no assets, and no function, other than to receive stolen money." Chloe finally found her voice. That's not true. Those are legitimate partners. This is slander." "Is it?" Elena said, her voice dangerously soft. She clicked again. A new image filled the screen. It was a security photo from a bank in Grand Cayman. It showed Marcus and Chloe, dressed in beachwear, signing documents at a banker's desk. The timestamp was from 3 months prior, when they'd told the board they were at a logistics conference in Berlin. Chloe Bishop's face went from pale to a mottled, sickly green. You, Marcus stammered, his mind finally catching up. "Elena, you were the analyst on the 25th floor." "Yes," Elena said. "I was. Elena Hayes. Hayes is my mother's name. I joined Ascension to find the rot in my new company. I was expecting to find waste. I was expecting to find incompetence." She stood up and walked slowly around the table, her heels clicking on the floor. "I did not expect to find it in my own home. I did not expect the man I was married to, the man whose career I quietly subsidized, whose apartment I bought, whose genius was built on my family's legacy, was the ringleader." She stopped directly behind Marcus, placing her hands on the back of his chair. He flinched, as if she'd struck him. "You called me an anchor, Marcus. You said I was holding you back while you were busy designing the future. But you weren't designing anything. You were just a common thief. A very, very stupid thief." "Elena, please," he whispered, the humiliation so profound it was physical. "We can fix this. It was a mistake. It was her." He pointed a trembling finger at Chloe. "She made me do it. She—" "Silence!" David Foster roared, slamming his hand on the table. "You will address the chairwoman as Miss Vance." Elena held up a hand. "It's all right, David. The desperation is fitting." She walked back to the head of the table. Ms. Bishop, your services are obviously terminated. Your shares are forfeit. Your pension is gone. Based on your contract, we are invoking the moral turpitude clause. You will leave this building with nothing. Security will escort you. 2 uniformed guards stepped forward and grabbed Chloe by the arms. "You can't do this!" Chloe screamed, her mask of composure shattering. "Marcus, tell them! Tell them!" Marcus just stared at the table, his world reduced to the polished grain of the mahogany. "As for you, Marcus," Elena said. Marcus looked up, his eyes pleading. This was his wife. Underneath all this, she was his wife. She had loved him. "Elena, honey, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I was an idiot. We can go to counseling. We can—" Elena looked at him, and for the first time, he saw no anger, no sadness. He saw nothing, just a void. "Mr. Reed," she said, "you seem to be under the impression this is a marital dispute. It is not." She nodded to the man from the DA's office. "Mr. Harrison, he's all yours." Mr. Harrison and 2 plain-clothes detectives stepped forward. "Marcus Reed," Harrison said, his voice booming, "you are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and embezzlement." One of the detectives pulled Marcus's arms behind his back and snapped handcuffs on his wrists. The cold, metallic click echoed through the vast, silent room. You bitch!" Marcus snarled, his terror finally turning to rage. "You did this! You set me up! You set yourself up, Marcus," Elena said, turning her back on him as the detectives hauled him away. "You just kicked the wrong person out of the house." She looked at the remaining, shell-shocked board members. "Now," she said, her voice all business, "let's talk about the future of this company." The fall was not a slow descent. It was a sudden, violent impact. Marcus Reed, VP of Global Strategy, was no longer a name. He was a case number. He spent the first 8 hours in a central booking holding cell. The Brioni suit, his armor of success, felt like a Halloween costume. It was wrinkled, and he was sure it smelled of the sour odor of the concrete cell, a mix of old sweat, bleach, and human despair. He sat on a steel bench, squeezed between a man mumbling to himself and another sleeping off a drunk, his head inches from Marcus's $800 silk blend trousers. Denial was his only shield. This was a mistake, a misunderstanding, a corporate power play. Elena was angry. She was lashing out. Once she calmed down, once he could talk to her, he could fix this. He just needed to get to a phone. He needed to call his lawyer, the shark from Cravath, Swain and Moore, who handled his, now laughably small, stock options. When he finally got his one phone call, the number for his high-powered lawyer went straight to a frosty-voiced assistant who informed him, "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed, but our firm will not be representing you in this matter. There appears to be a severe conflict of interest." "What conflict?" he'd yelled into the receiver. "Tell them who I am." "We know who you are, sir," the voice had replied, dripping with contempt. "We represent the Vance Global Holding Company. Have a good day." Click. She had already cut him off. Elena, his quiet, mousy, average wife, had a legal firewall that could repel an army. Panic, cold and oily, began to seep through his denial. He was forced to call his parents in Ohio. He had to reverse the charges. His mother's sobs, his father's stunned, angry silence. It was a new kind of humiliation. "They say the bail is $5 million, Marcus," his father had yelled. $5 million? What in God's name did you do?" "It's a mistake, Dad. They said you're a flight risk. They said you have offshore accounts. We're going to have to mortgage the house, Mark. The house you grew up in. We'll be there in the morning." The shame burned hotter than his rage. He had built an empire, he'd told them. He was a rocket. Now he was just a son who had destroyed his parents' retirement. By the time he was released 36 hours later, bailed out by his father's pension fund, the world he knew was gone. His face was on the cover of the New York Post. "Tower of Greed," the headline screamed, featuring a split photo of his smug corporate headshot next to his new, haggard mugshot. Worse, the perp walk had been a masterpiece of psychological torture orchestrated by Eleanor. Security had routed him not out the back exit, but through the main, marble-floored atrium of the Ascension Tower. It was 12:30 p.m., the lunch rush. He was paraded in handcuffs past hundreds of his former colleagues. He saw analysts he had terrorized, managers he had stepped on, and the entire data team from the 25th floor, Elena's old department, who had all gathered by the elevators. They didn't jeer, they didn't gasp, they just watched. A woman he recognized, Sarah, who used to sit 3 desks from Elena, just looked at him, took a slow sip of her coffee, and smiled. It was the smile of a person watching a tyrant finally get what he deserved. He stumbled out onto the street, his father posting the bond with a cashier's check that represented his entire life savings. He was handed a small plastic bag with his wallet, his Patek Philippe, which the DA Orr's office had, to his surprise, not kept, and his phone. He was left with the suit on his back and the $800 he had tried to give Eleanor. The irony was so bitter it tasted like acid. "I have to go to the condo," he told his father, his voice hoarse. "I have to talk to her. I have to get my things. Marcus, the lawyer we found—" "I don't care! I have to see her!" He took a cab, a yellow cab, the first he'd been in for 5 years, to East 57th Street. He felt like a ghost, haunting his own life. He walked into the gleaming lobby, his heart pounding. Tony, the doorman, the man Marcus had tipped $500 just last Christmas, stepped out from behind his marble desk. His face was a mask of professional regret. "Mr. Reed, I'm afraid I can't let you up." "Tony, don't be ridiculous," Marcus snapped, his old arrogance flaring. "This is my home. I live here. Open the elevator." "I'm sorry, sir. My instructions are clear," Tony said, his voice firm. He was no longer looking at a resident. He was looking at a problem. "You are not a resident here. You are on the permanent trespass list." "Trespass list? In my own building? I'll have your job for this, Tony." Tony sighed, a small, sad sound. "Sir, with respect, you don't seem to understand. You didn't just live in Ms. Vance's condo. You lived in Ms. Vance's building. The Vance Trust has owned this entire tower since it was built in 1998. She is your landlord." The blood drained from Marcus's face. The entire tower, his office on the 72nd floor, the gym, the lobby, the condo. It had all been hers. He wasn't just a rat in a trap. He had been a rat in her custom-built, glass and steel maze. My things," he stammered, his rage collapsing into a pathetic wheeze. "My clothes, my files." All non-personal items were removed by Ms. Vance's staff and placed in a storage unit in New Jersey, Tony said, reading from a memo. "A packet was sent to your lawyer." "My lawyer?" Marcus said, bewildered. "I don't have—" Just then, a man in a cheap suit tapped him on the shoulder. "Marcus Reed?" "Yes." "You've been served." The man handed him a thick envelope and walked away. Marcus tore it open, standing in the lobby that was no longer his. It was the divorce filing. It was not a simple petition. It was a 200-page tactical nuke. Grounds, adultery, conspiracy to commit grand larceny, and gross financial malfeasance. It detailed with timestamps every single meeting he'd had with Chloe, hotel receipts, dinner bills. It even included a transcript of a call he'd made from his private office line, booking their conference trip to the Caymans, but the asset division was the true execution. Condo, East 57th Street, sole and separate property of Eleanor Vance. Mr. Reed is entitled to no equity. Vehicles, Audi R8, Range Rover. Corporate assets, leases terminated, repossessed. Bank accounts, all joint accounts frozen. A forensic audit is underway to claw back all funds expended by Mr. Reed on non-marital pursuits, including all gifts, travel, and entertainment for his co-conspirator, Ms. Chloe Bishop. She wasn't just divorcing him, she was billing him for the affair. At the bottom was a handwritten note from his new, court-appointed lawyer. "Marcus, call me. Your preliminary hearing is tomorrow. And whatever you do, do not try to contact your wife. Also, Chloe Bishop took a deal. She's testifying against you. Says you were the mastermind and threatened her job if she didn't comply. You're on your own." He was alone. Utterly, completely alone. Chloe had saved herself. His contacts wouldn't answer his calls. His bank accounts were locked. His credit cards, he discovered, were all supplementary cards on Eleanor's primary account. Declined. 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 He ended up at a $49 a night motel in Queens, the kind with a flickering neon vacancy sign that cast a sickly red glow on the stained carpet. He paid in cash, using the last of the $800. His $3,000 suit was now his only set of clothes. He collapsed onto the lumpy bed, the springs groaning in protest. He turned on the small, buzzing TV. And there she was, Eleanor Vance. She was on CNBC, being interviewed live. She was incandescent. She wore a simple, elegant red dress. Her hair was perfect. Her smile was calm and confident. The host was hanging on her every word. "Ms. Vance," the host said, "it's an incredible story. You've taken the business world by storm. In your first official act as chairwoman, you uncovered a $16 million fraud and restructured your entire executive team. People are calling you the Vance Inquisitor. What's your secret to such decisive action?" Elena smiled, a small, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked directly into the camera, and Marcus felt as if she was staring right at him, sitting in his squalid motel room. "It's no secret, really," she said, her voice as smooth and cool as glass. "I just believe in accountability. Whether it's in the boardroom or in your personal life, you can't build a stable future on a rotten foundation. You have to be willing to find the rot, the weakness, and cut it out, no matter how personal it is." The host nodded, mesmerized. "That's a tough philosophy." "It's the only one that works," Elena said. She leaned forward, as if sharing a secret with the world. "My father always taught me. Some things in life seem like they're supporting you, but they're really just holding you down. You have to be willing to cut the anchor." She paused, and her smile finally reached her eyes, cold and bright as a winter star. "And watch the deadweight sink." The phone in Marcus's hand vibrated. It was a text from his new lawyer. DA just added a new charge, money laundering. They found another account in Zurich. "They're pulling the bail, Marcus. They're coming to get you." Marcus stared at the TV, at the face of the woman he had discarded. The rocket. The anchor. He had been so wrong. He wasn't the rocket. He was, and had always been, the dead weight. And the ocean floor was rushing up to meet him. A week passed, a week of pure, unadulterated hell. Marcus's lawyer, a third-rate public defender, had been blunt. "You're cooked, Mr. Reed. They have bank records, surveillance photos, and a sworn affidavit from your ex-wife. She's not just the victim here. She's the chief witness and the prosecution's star. They're offering a plea. 10 years. 10 years? Marcus had choked. For a white-collar crime. For stealing nearly $16 million from one of the most powerful women in New York. You're lucky they're not asking for 20. He was out on bail, but he was a prisoner. His name was Toxic. He'd tried to get a job, any job. The moment they typed his name into Google, the interview was over. He was living on the fumes of his parents' credit card. Chloe, he'd heard, had fared even worse. She had no family wealth to fall back on. She'd turned state's witness, agreeing to testify against Marcus in exchange for a reduced sentence. That was the last text he'd ever received from an unknown number. I'm taking the deal. You're on your own. Rot in hell. He had one last, desperate idea. The storage unit. Elena's message had said his belongings were in a unit in New Jersey. He still had the key to their old shared storage unit, one they'd had before the condo. Maybe she'd used that one. Maybe, just maybe. There was something in there. Old documents. Cash he'd stashed. Anything. He took a bus to Secaucus. The storage facility was a bleak, sprawling complex. He found the unit, C212. He put his key in the lock. It clicked open. He rolled up the metal door, his heart pounding with a sliver of hope. The unit was almost empty. In the center of the dusty concrete floor sat a single, solitary object. It wasn't a box of cash. It wasn't his expensive suits. It wasn't his golf clubs or his designer furniture. It was the old canvas suitcase he had thrown at Elena. Taped to the handle was an envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was not a legal document. It was a single piece of paper. It was the $800 in cash he had thrown on the counter. Underneath the bills, a single sentence was written in Eleanor's elegant, precise handwriting. You're a rocket, Marcus. Have a nice flight. He collapsed to his knees, the useless money fluttering to the ground. It was the ultimate, final insult. She hadn't just taken his future. She'd returned his past. She'd given him back exactly what he thought she was worth. He looked at the empty unit, the single bag, and the cash. He finally understood. She hadn't just been investigating him for 6 months. She had been judging him for 5 years. She had given him every chance to be a better man, and he had failed every single test. He thought back to that night. I've outgrown you. What a joke. He had never even been in her league. He was sitting there, a broken man in a cheap suit, when his phone rang. It was his lawyer. Marcus, the lawyer said, his voice flat. The DA just called. Ms. Vance's legal team submitted a final piece of evidence. It's bad. What is it? Marcus whispered, already knowing it was over. A recording. From your condo. It seems the entire penthouse had a security system. One you didn't know about. They have audio of your entire breakup. They have you confessing to your relationship with Ms. Bishop. They have you threatening your wife. And worst of all, they have you kicking her out. The lawyer sighed. The DA is pulling the plea deal. They're going to trial. They're not asking for 10 years anymore, Marcus. They're asking for the maximum. 25. The phone slipped from Marcus's hand and clattered on the concrete. He stared into the darkness of the empty storage unit, a tomb he had built for himself, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Reed, the rocket, finally, truly, understood the crushing, infinite weight of the anchor. And just like that, the rocket was grounded. Forever. Marcus Reed didn't just lose his job. He lost his wife, his freedom, and his entire identity, all because his arrogance blinded him to the truth. He thought he was kicking out an anchor, but he was really kicking out the Queen. Elena Vance proved that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful, and that karmic justice, when it finally arrives, is always served ice cold. What did you think of Marcus's downfall? Was it justified? What would you have done if you were Elena? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This story was a wild one, and if you want more dramatic stories of betrayal and karmic retribution, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves drama, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. We have new stories coming every week, and you don't want to miss what happens next.